Programmatic now. And let me bring in Melissa Bonnick, who is the Senior Vice President of Client Results at dentsu Programmatic. Melissa, are you there? Unmute and turn on your camera, Melissa, you're there. Hey, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Where do we find you today?
I am in Brooklyn.
Oh, a lot of snow?
Oh, I do not envy anyone right now who had to do as much shoveling as I had to.
I lived in Brooklyn for a while. Doesn't deal with snow too well. Really?
Nope.
Melissa spent more than a decade in the digital ad space at Havas, New York Times, and Everyday Health. We're going to talk. Melissa. Before we move to the panel, we're going to also bring up a poll. Let's call that up and have everybody weigh in before we start the panel. How will marketplace changes impact your programmatic media planning in the coming year? Check all that apply. More use of walled gardens with their own data, more first-party data usage, more contextual data providers, investing in new programmatic inventory options and channels, or no real changes yet. Melissa, how would you answer
that? I would say that I hope it's not just more contextual data providers. So I'm into everything else right now. I really don't want for us to go back to contextual only.
You don't, by the way, we should mention it. I'm sure it'll come up in the panel at some point. As we've been talking this week, Tim Cook made a very big stab at Mark Zuckerberg and ad identifiers. Don't you think that, especially the imposition of iOS 14 and its limitation on ad identifiers, might move some media buyers more towards contextual targeting?
I would hope that it would move buyers more towards first party rather than contextual, and properly being able to use the first party that they have. But I know the interim and the stopgap will probably be contextual, yeah.
Okay. All right, I think we've got a quorum here. Let's end the poll and bring up the results. And the overwhelming majority, in fact, agree with you, Melissa, that 92% who expect more first-party data. In fact, that's a theme we see almost at all of our events, especially the brand-focused events, are the strategies that they're using to harvest that data and how best to integrate it in all of their systems. But also more use of walled garden with their own data, still 41%. More contextual data providers, 43%. And investing in new programmatic inventory options and channels, 42%. Melissa, what do you think of that?
I think I'm excited about those results. So yeah.
more money for programmatic. I'm going to shut up and go away and let you and the panel take it away.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks.
All right, so we know that 2020, when it came to COVID, we really started to focus on being more efficient with inventory, the pricing that we had, and the usage patterns of said inventory. But as we start to look at 2021 and beyond, we're starting to see that everyone is really focused on 2022. So what we really want to go deep into is how exactly we should be thinking about programmatic planning, both in 2021 and beyond, how we can get ourselves to the point where we don't have to worry about what is happening with data restrictions, but then also making sure that we're taking into account the new inventory that's readily available. So we've got Andrew, Rem, and Karima here with us today, who I can say that it was a very lively discussion when we had our conversation last week. So I think this will be a really good panel. So Rem, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. In 2020, we know that COVID forced marketers to make their media dollars work a lot more. From a high level, what do you think they should carry into 2021?
Well, thank you, Melissa. First off, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you for inviting me to the panel. Specifically to answer your question about 2021, well, what a year 2020 has been, right? I'm sure everybody will agree, and I'm sure there's many sentiments associated with that. But a few themes have emerged for us right off the bat. Performics, where I work, has always been, Forrester has blessed up with the accolade of the leading performance marketing agency for a couple of times in the last decade. So performance has always been a focus for us, and all the analytics that goes with it. But one thing that became distinctly clear in 2020 is as budgets were being pulled by the different marketers at all levels, different brands were trying to struggle with how should they keep their brand afloat and performance afloat in what was a receding economy. The need for performance just became overwhelming. I couldn't tell you, I had every possible business associate call me and say, what can we do with more? So the general theme that we saw was performance has to be the focus. I need to find things to do more. That was the overarching theme. Under there, a few things started to take shape. First and foremost, I clearly see a distinct need for an evolved measurement, because the moment you have a conversation around how can you deliver more from the same dollars that you had, or in many cases, a receding pool of dollars, the obvious conversation went to, can we better measure the impact of those dollars? So evolved measurements, advanced measurements, something that that I love spending a lot of my time on, started to take more of a front seat discussion. The second theme that I saw there, all related to performance, the second theme I saw was businesses asking for a much tighter integration of media analytics into their core business. Can media analytics and the insights that we're drawing from it help business adapt to those changes? Whether you're a business where you got a little bit of a headwind, like the telecoms of the world and the video conferencing providers of the world, or the rest of the world where you saw headwinds, in either of those situations, there was a need to take the analytical insights and tie it better to the business. And I'll couple with that advanced measurement that I mentioned. And last but not the least, an increased appetite for testing. Earlier, we would see many people push back and say, yes, testing is important, but we want to be very diligent on how much we allocate to testing. So those would be my three themes that I've identified, all leading towards general overarching need for getting more performance from the dollars.
Okay. So I know that obviously one of the things that you mentioned was measurement. To all of you, were cookies really that bad to start with?
Yes. There's a lot of things that have been around for the past 25 years on the internet that should never have been around as long as they have. And I will actually include banner ads in that. So, and that's when I start taking daggers. But
there are some programmatic people who are clutching their pearls right now.
Oh, I understand. The great thing about banner ads back in the day, of course, is that it taught us a lot about targeting data with the RTB marketplace, 10 years ago and so forth. But by the way, first and foremost, Melissa, I just need to just say to everybody on the call who's on the Northeast, our sympathies here from Minnesota go out to you. I'm sending everybody a care package of Minnesota-made very tiny violins. So
I would appreciate more salt, because I definitely did not buy enough of that.
Always buy a white car. I think that cookies had a nice run, and I think what we're saying right now is that clearly I don't think it was ever intended to be what it became, and all of the advancements that are happening now with targeting technologies, is essentially the evolution of the internet to respect privacy and also give the promise of targeting to advertisers. And building on the last session, which I thought was great, people began turning off advertising and desiring to turn off advertising because it was irrelevant. It became more and more irrelevant. I'm not saying that's a cookie problem, but I am saying that the advancements that we're seeing in the industry is really trying to build a better internet and a better media environment for consumers. And you essentially have to either agree or disagree with this central premise, which is that either you believe people hate or do not hate advertising. And I believe that people do not hate advertising. I think that if you look at your Instagram feed and you swipe up or TikTok now these days, right, and you see an ad, and more often than not, it's fairly highly targeted to you, and it aligns with your life. And when that happens, it actually creates a better environment for you. And cookies just, I don't think, had the heft or the sophistication necessary to keep up with consumer demand. And I think this is a very good thing that is happening.
Okay. So with that being said, who do you think the solution rests with right now in terms of finding a solution and a replacement for cookies?
I would like to jump in here, yeah. And you know, I will not rush into judging the cookie until we see the replacement, right? Like, you know, I have been around for years, and I remember when a cookie meant a person, right? When everyone had one device, one cookie, and we had very insightful, trusted measurement. And cookie allowed us to deliver experiences. But as you know, the media environment became very cluttered, complicated. The number of devices and the nature of those devices and the availability of tracking in certain platform and not changed over time. The cookie is not delivering everything that used to deliver in the past. And I think our understanding of that evolution of how much we should have been trusting cookie and how much we shouldn't have been using cookie in certain area get lost because we got used to use them for everything. So I feel like that was the issue with cookies. And I wouldn't say that they have been horrible. They actually played a big role in evolving our ecosystem, in providing us measurement and read. And I'm not sure we will have better solutions soon. I think that it will take time to really replace all these functionalities that came from cookies. I think that cookies, we judge them by bad because of privacy concern. I think the fact that cookie were dropped without consent is the bad thing, not the cookie themselves. You know, and I think they were, you know, there's multiple use cases for cookie. In multiple cases, we shouldn't be using cookie. In multiple cases, we could have been smarter and looked for consent before we drop cookies on people's computers and devices. And I think, you know, all of this compiled made a bad reputation for the third-party cookie, particularly. You know, again, cookies still exist on the first-party side, so that's not going away, and that's still good. And it will be more consent-based, you know, data collection. But the third-party cookie is the one that needed to get better, or data collection needs to be more with the consent overall, even without cookie. We need to make sure that data is collected even without cookie with consent, with knowledge that the consumer or the user have on how that data will be used and who will use that data. So that's my perspective. So I feel bad. I have this nostalgia for cookies that come from years ago. That's how I started my work analyzing cookies back in the days. But yes,
I don't want to burden that topic, but I do tend to agree, you know, with Karima. I think your point, Andrew, is valid, that it was delivered and it was used in a way beyond its original purpose. But to specifically talk about evolution of measurement, as I mentioned it a minute ago, right? If we hadn't gotten to this point, I'm sure all of you associate this or have seen this transition. We seem to have just moved away from the power of analysis of data, and we seem to have just set that aside and say, I practically feel myself shackled if I can't do 100% of everything in a completely deterministic manner. And so now I have this over-reliance on every bit of descriptor that I can collect about you. And as somebody who's spent almost 30 years of my life doing this, there is a hybrid solution. There is a solution where we need to use both. And I think, without belaboring the point, if it wasn't for the cookie and the descriptors that we started to enjoy over a period of time and the use cases that we built out of it, our measurement ecosystem would not be at a point where it is evolved as much and still room to go. But that formed the basis for the evolution of the measurement system, and also raise awareness across marketers, CMOs, and their teams. Because if it wasn't for that, we would still be living in a different age.
So I want to talk to that a little bit more. So I know that you're all basically saying that we have to start to think about how measurement is going to evolve now that we don't have or we will not have the cookies any longer. What do you feel is most important that marketers need to look at now and prep for when we need for measurement to evolve?
I will jump here because I hated certain measurement that were built on cookies, especially the last few years. And I hated it. It's exaggerating, of course, but I had a huge concern about using cookies for measurement, knowing all the bias, knowing the multiple cookies that people have, especially when we answer the question around multi-touch attribution. My belief, and I'm so happy to see us moving in that direction, that we will have more advanced analytics work done finally. Not the easy, let's distribute credit, or let's give this touch point this weight, etc., but really in an econometric way, using machine learning to start to really model and understand more holistically. In these cases, walled garden will not be a limit for modeling. Will be able to have way more insight and way more learnings and holistic view on how media is working. So, in a way, it's a blessing because we now are forced to move into better, more sophisticated and more advanced and thorough and robust methods for measurement.
I don't believe that I don't think most brands have even defined their KPIs, generally speaking, today with what we have. Mm-hmm. They're generally siloed by channel. Teams sit independent of one another. This sometimes happens even within agencies themselves. I think that even once again, in the last conversation, when somebody asked the question about are CPMs too high in CTV? Well, let me teach you, let's talk a little bit about the B2B environment, where a cost per acquisition is a scientific thing. And you have a B2B environment where a brand is willing to spend thousands of dollars for a lead. And so now we're concerned sometimes about a $35 CPM or something like this. I think that what's going to be really interesting is that more and more sophisticated marketers are actually going to learn from their B2B brethren in the B2C world to really understand the value chain across the entire media ecosystem, from search at the very bottom to connected TV or out of home, which we can now, of course, obviously buy programmatically as well at the very top, and do the economics to really understand how each of those channels contribute to an end result that we want. And by the way, we haven't even talked about what's the value of loyalty and advocacy post-purchase and all of this. So the level of sophistication that we're about to encounter, I think, is in some cases, has been around for a long time, say in the B2B environment that's reliant upon sales teams and lead gen and so forth. We're going to start looking at that as well in the business to consumer marketplace. And I think that, one of the things that's really interesting about some of these evolving new channels that are available to all of us is that when you take targeting and you take data into your media plans and into your audience plans, you're really not talking about awareness anymore. Those traditional awareness channels are now prospecting channels, because you're really only buying the people who are watching that show or any other show. You're not buying the content. You're not buying the show. You're buying the person who is watching the show and whatever show that they may be watching. So it really flips a lot of different things, I think, on our heads and really changes the entire measurement scheme from top to bottom. And I think that a lot of brand marketers are going to start to have to really come to grips with better measurement of the full ecosystem and not in a siloed approach. And that's a human problem. That's an organizational problem, not as much a technology or a data science problem.
So you referenced just now, obviously, that pricing, and I know they mentioned it during the panel, the end of the previous panel about pricing. What else can a marketer do to make sure that they're focusing on the value of the consumer rather than how, cheaply they can purchase the inventory for?
I'll jump in here. That is a fantastic question. I think that is the right way to look at it. I think once again, as we look through this thing, we've got to be prepared for a pricing split. There are going to be channels that will, with the right measurement approach, you will find that there are things that are undervalued and they are overvalued. And why I bring this point in here is, as soon as we start talking about evolved ways of assigning fractional credit to any touch point, right? Whether it's done in a natural self-learning way or it's done in various different ways using advanced methods, all of a sudden the picture is going to change. I made a point earlier on your first question about everything being looked at deterministically. And again, this is from a data POV. I completely understand the points that my colleagues and everybody's making. My point here is, if you simply look at everything in a connected data architecture, the fractional credit that should be assigned to any touch point is going to be inaccurate. And what that leads is to pricing situations that are not correct. You may be assigning overweight to something that is less, that contributes less value to the overall customer experience, revenue, conversion, you name it. Similarly, anything that gets drop down in favor of one of those factors is probably going to be undervalued. One is going to be overvalued, one is going to be undervalued. So as measurement systems do evolve, there is going to be a little bit of a bifurcation. Now, obviously, you've got to reconcile that with supply side as well. But my larger point here is, it is actually important to look at this from a customer standpoint, from an acquisition standpoint, because the overall business, I also mentioned that we're seeing a lot of integration of media analytics into business. The reason that happens at the COO levels or the operations level is because they're looking at the overall profitability of the business. And by doing so, it will absolutely be okay in certain situations that you have to buy media at a much more higher expensive rate than you're used to paying, because it will drive higher LTV, it will drive higher AOV, it might have a higher propensity to reach audiences and convert them that are not converting today. So in summary, what I would say is, we should expect that pricing split or distribution to happen, but again, that has to happen along with an evolved measurement system, so that we're doing it fairly in the interest of the business that we're representing.
And let's just be clear that we are moving in the direction of more transparency and more exact science. We are moving away from panel data. I mean, you want an inexact science. Let's talk about linear TV all day long. It was a much easier business to be in terms of data sets. And so I think that, let's not just evolve, but understand that everything is evolving towards more precision. And I think that there is nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's happening across every other part of the organization. Why wouldn't it be in marketing as well? So yes, it's a problem because everything is now measurable, but it is also it's why the CFOs and the CMOs are actually, for the first time in generations, starting to get along.
Yeah. I will add only one thing to what you said, Andrew, earlier, and also I think, Rami, you mentioned it too, which is the short-term measurement of performance. We are doing that, and we will keep doing that because of the way we are set up in media, that it's more of that upper funnel, no matter what, type of driver, versus the fact that we should more and more adopt the CRM measurement, which is more of that lifetime value that really tells us how much we should be spending to acquire someone, and how much is that ID valued, and how much is that touch point worth. I don't think it's even relevant to talk about price, because expensive or not, it depends on the value. Like if I'm selling, a $50,000 product at $20 or a $30 or a $40 CPM is cheap. Let's put it this way. But if I'm selling, a $3, product, who knows what's the lifetime value of that customer over time? But that $30 CPM is assessed very differently. So that's, I think, a very key element to what is cheap, what is not cheap. And I think we should not really blend and judge the value of a channel until and unless we understand the value of the acquisition we are bringing through that channel. And that math is not well done today. It's not done the way you would expect it to be done to really allow us good and solid planning and detailed media plans.
And to that very point that you're making, look, a $30 CPM on the same inventory on the supply side could actually be a very profitable acquisition for one brand, and it could be a very unprofitable acquisition for another. And you wouldn't know that until and unless you're looking at the customer data, because then that directly translates into how much do you want to bid for it? How much do you want to position it? It can lead to strategies saying, okay, if you are seeing intense competition in one area or one day, there are so many ways in which you can take action on it. There is no straight answer that says that CPM is good or bad, because again, unless you look at it from a customer lens, there's no way to generalize what is cheap and what is expensive.
Yeah. And the other gap we have in our measurement and how we measure is also the understanding of the impact on brand equity. So again, all the models we use today, MTA, you name it, like a metric we use, are always looking at sales, right? And the short-term sales. And the value of that 60% brand equity, we don't have a lot of insight on. And based on how we measure and how we are using the data, we need to really invest and dig deeper into what makes those 60% of sales that we don't know where they are coming. And for sure, they have been also built and are originated because of all the brand work that has been done that are not measured the same way as the ones that are driving to sales. So again, there is a lot of room for improvement and for work on the analytical side. It's actually job security for many of us here to really uncover a lot of these answers and be better at planning media and executing and activating media.
Melissa, do you mind if I make 2 brief points about that? Because I love listening to you, to the two of you talk about this. First of all, I'm not a scientist. I don't have doctorate in front of my name, so that doesn't help. But one of the things that I think is really interesting about all of this is that we talk a lot about first-party data. And if you look at whatever CPM you're spending to attract volumes of traffic, if you will, to wherever you want to convert, and one of your KPIs is to convert that data into first-party data, ideally an email address, an ID of some sort that you can actually remarket to and have a relationship with. Now you're talking about actually valuing the individual, not an impression. And the gap between the value of an impression and the value of a person should be a huge gap. And the second thing that the point I want to make about that is we have to understand that what we're talking about oftentimes, and I'm taking a very empathetic approach towards publishers, because publishers gave away this inventory for 2 generations of the internet. And as long as you purchased newspaper or linear local television, we'll give you the digital inventory. Well, everyone went to digital inventory and was used to cheap impressions. And they were never able to get, and they're still clawing back to try and get to the value that they sold before off of a rate card, essentially. What I'm encouraged by is that as we begin to properly value the individuals, then that is going to reward publishers for creating the content in the first place that attracted those people. And when publishers start to actually make money again, that is good for news. It's good for democracy. I mean, I could go on and on. This is where my poli-sci major guy comes out. But this is a good thing. Publishers should be properly compensated for creating content that attracts people that we want to come to. And today, newsrooms are decimated because that financial model broke over the past 25 years. And the clawback on that, I think, could be enormously important if we do actually take this properly targeted value, where the gap between impression and person finally starts to properly value individuals.
I
So
like
I'm
how
going to go back to the publisher bit in a minute, but I do want to ask specifically of all of you, based on what you just mentioned, Andrew, does that mean you feel as though marketers should be building initiatives into their programmatic plans with the intention of building their first party data? Or is it by nature going to form that way through their marketing plans?
First party data is the currency of success moving forward. Even the poll, I think, in the last session showed that we sort of all agree with that. You know, if you look at Amazon's value proposition in the marketplace, the value that it isn't because it has warehouses and trucks and places to put products. It's the world's largest repository of first party and preference data. That's the value, that's the IP of Amazon. That's what everybody is trying to do. And so it's the reason why they can always sell you what you're looking for and what you need. In fact, I think it's over 50% of all product searches start at Amazon. They don't start at Google because the promise of Amazon is clear. And I also think that if you look at it straightly from an ROI standpoint, and I hate to go totally old school on this, but like email marketing, still the best performing channel across all channels. And the ROI on email alone is great. And the most successful brands in the world understand this. And so when you look at it, the closer and closer you get to actually having a conversation and creating a one-to-one relationship, the promise of CRM, the promise of email service providers, we're basically saying that we're taking the models of email marketing and we're attaching it to almost all other channels now. And so it's not new. This has been around for a very, very long time, but it's just that the other channels are now have the addressability that everything else has had. So I think the KPIs of buying third-party data while you still can in order to grow your first-party data pool, and thereby necessitating a need for a CDP or something like this, where all of this can live together, is really, I think, for me, it's what 2021 is all about.
Melissa, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So I know that we're coming up on time. I wanted to ask one final question. As we are looking at 2021, if you had to give a recommendation for what everyone needs to focus on, both in the next 6 months and then through the rest of this year, so short-term and long-term, what would be the recommendations that you would have for planning and executing programmatic campaigns?
Let me jump in very quickly. I'd say based on what we are seeing, I mentioned at the top of the hour, this would be a time in the short term to evolve your measurement capability as you're building that capability. Because again, the awareness and recognition towards building that capability, testing out, whether you're doing a full-on test, whether you're doing fractional experimentation, whatever the methods may be, between building the measurement capability and testing things, I would say our recommendation would be put emphasis on that in the first 6 months of this year, because as the vaccine rolls out and as people start to go back to work and economy starts to trot along towards some semblance of what the world used to be, it won't happen in the short term, but as we start to take steps towards it, I invariably see marketers switching back to scale. And once they start demanding scale, as the economy starts to come back up, the appetite for building advanced measurement is going to slow down over a period of time. So I'd say in the near term, focus on delivering performance and building capability. And I'd say 6 months out, get ready for, again, scale coming back into picture.
I will cover two main areas I think the focus should be on. And the first, Ram, you explained it very well, which is measurement. I don't think we can make any decision without understanding performance and where performance comes from. So definitely, before even thinking about investment, do we have really the right measurement to understand what works, what doesn't work? Second is to assess the needs of data, and first and third party data. I don't think all the industry have the same quality of first party data or can aspire to have the same quality of first party data, retail versus CPG. We cannot compare the type of access they can have and to quality first party data, but also thinking about, what do we need for good prospecting, because first-party data is rarely the best data for prospecting. It will get you what you used to have, and to grow, you need something very different from what you used to attract. And third-party data is not going away. Cookies are going away. Third-party data is not going away. And offline data is super robust. That's what has been used in CRM and in direct mail. And there is still a huge investment in direct mail to build propensity models for credit cards and other industries. So let's go to the fundamental. What data do we need first and third? You know, what data has value for us? What is the value of the data? And what to acquire, what to license in terms of data, not to overspend, because we have seen a lot of those experiences where there were a lot of investment that didn't really deliver in terms of data and tech. And again, to Ram's point, measurement is key.
And I would say that measure what matters. And I think that that is really what when you make a commitment to measuring what matters, it gets rid of about 20 to 25% of the inputs. Mm-hmm. And I think that what's interesting about that is that, again, too often times attribution questions are oftentimes self-serving and defensive versus really looking at what matters. And what matters is the business growing? And what is marketing's contribution towards that? And so I think tethering marketing to business goals is obviously what it should always have been about, but it now can be much more tightly tethered. But if you are trying to measure 100% with 100% accuracy, you will never get to the destination you're trying to go to. And so it's really the word that we've been using a lot so far this year. Well, so far this year is only a month, but is moving with intention, with intentionality. Really have a focus. If you're going to be doing testing, this is a great year for testing, to really understand what are you testing? Not testing a channel, but testing for an outcome. And I think that when you are really focused on the outcome, it really liberates you and allows you to try different mixes, different media mixes, different audience segmentation, different screens, different time, I mean, all the different ways of doing it. But if you're all focused, when I say all, I mean agency and people on client teams, to stay focused on, did we actually have an impact on the outcome? I think that that will free you from the sort of the internal warfare that happens with attributions.
Okay, that was amazing, you guys. It's like incredible, all of the information you guys are giving. And something jumped out at me as you're talking, and I think specifically Andrew, if you, as far as a universal measurement, we're not, we've been talking about that now for the past year, and who knows when that's going to happen. So if you're really targeting, you're really getting that data, and then you're really able to get that information and really take that focus and then be able to hyper target your audience. Isn't that in fact going to be driving them down the funnel? Is more precise you get? Isn't that a way to, get that performance angle out of it while, and then we sort of collaborate and put it all together, put it in total. Do you see that as being something that's efficient for people to do down the line?
Well, we've had zero conversations so far about creative, right? But one of the things that I think is we're still waiting on, and that is truly interactivity across all channels. And so as soon as television, for example, the broadest reach, is interactive, and I can see an ad and I can either use my clicker or my phone to interact with that ad to do something next. I could opt in, I could download something, I could download the app. You can already see the early cases of interactivity built within creative. That whole layer means that there's no gap now between awareness and conversion. Now, that's not true for a $50,000 product, but it certainly is true for something that could be a consumable item. The other thing, Melissa, you asked the question and none of us answered it. How about that? Who's going to have the solution to this? And, is it the trade desk and what they're doing with universal ID? Is it, the battle between Facebook and Apple and all of this? I mean, I'm a big proponent of the free market. I do think that not everyone is as blessed as your agencies are and clients are of having data scientists on staff. And so we're going to have a suite of solutions by the private market. Now, when I say private marketplace, I mean like the free market. And people are going to have to do that. They're going to have to bring scale. There's money to be made in having a universal ID. There's no question about that. And so I think that the solution is going to be a marketplace solution. And I think that we're going to have a variety of solutions, and it'll be interesting.
And I just want to do one quick question before you guys have to go. We have had with Facebook, winners and losers, and this is from Steve Smith. Have we had it with Facebook yet? Will programmatic dollars start flowing to other platforms, and which will grow most by year end? Any takers for that one?
I can take a stab at it. I don't know if I have a silver bullet, Steve. It's the same situation. We are seeing, again, with respect to some of our clients, that it is flowing in, but in general, as the channels become more available and as inventory becomes larger, more inventory becomes available because of the lower demand, higher supply. My guess would be that some of the dollars would flow out of there. I think if it starts to go in the route of efficacy, you might find that some of the other channels might start to, but that would be my guess. At this point in time, I'm seeing pretty much a mixed response, but I wouldn't be surprised if it starts to flow out a little bit, simply because of the play between demand and supply.
But again, this is where measurement comes to play, right? Because if we cannot prove that with these changes, those channels are still delivering from an outcome and performance standpoint what they used to deliver before the changes, and maybe more, yes, dollars will definitely flow out. And I mean, I'm even questioning the marketing and the media budget overall, what it's going to look like. And measurement is the only answer here to ensure that the dollars, are able to stay, or to prove that those dollars are working and continue to work even with less visibility on the tactical level. So, again, no one knows. And I think the next 6 months are crucial to see all of this and what's going to happen.
Lisa, I think that Facebook is not going away by any stretch, but I think the dollars may go into other social channels. I think we're going to see a big evolution with TikTok and Snapchat. I think they will take Facebook's dollars. I don't think it will come from any other channel necessarily. And I would love to see CTV be a great growth curve. The problem, though, is that during COVID, and we're still at a terrible place with COVID. We can't forget that. It's not going to be end anytime soon. It's hard to shoot TV spots. It's hard to create that content right now, just on a human level. It's very difficult, and it is also expensive. And so I think that there's some creative production problems that may keep some of the CTV from going as far as it would if we were in a healthy economy.
Right. And also now you bring up TikTok, because again, that's an easy way to sort of answer that problem of not being able to produce things outside. And our TV and video, we actually are going to have case study on TikTok and talk about it a lot, because that is something I'm hearing about from everyone that I've been, speaking with. They're trying to find creative ways to get that video out there. So just a little side mention there for our summit coming up. So anyway, you guys, thank you so much. That was really great stuff. Melissa, you were an awesome moderator. Thank you for doing that for us. And Ram and Karima and Andrew, thank you for joining us. That was really great. So, and
Thank you, everyone.
And have a great day. And even in Minnesota, deal with your shoveling, but it's still bad here in Westchester.